Hello and welcome to That British Homestead. Today I'm sweating out because we're going to be doing the paths over the allotments. I've spent the last 2 days doing the paths around here in the allotment. It's been a lot of work, my goodness. Do you know what? It's startling how fit you get from doing gardening. Okay, I am boiling hot, rosy cheeked, but I've probably moved a ton of wood chip. So I've actually spent 12 hours solid moving wood chip, like stopping for an odd drink, and that's it. Madness. Now there's two things that are very excited about that. One, I really need to get some more wood chip, and two, I pretty much sorted out my mushroom beds for next year, which is very, very exciting. My idea for this year is to grow mushrooms in wood chip beds. I've got wine cap mushrooms and I've got blue oyster mushrooms. Very excited about that. I've actually never grown mushrooms outside before, but I've done a ton of research about it and this seems to be a really good way. So I'm using normal wood chips that you can get free from a wood chipper. If you can't in your area, seriously call them about. That's what I did, and after about 2 years I found one that was willing to deposit for free, which is awesome. So what I'm going to do is probably at the weekend, when I go ahead and sow my potatoes, I'm going to scatter some indoctrinated, I'm terrible at pronunciation, seeds for mushrooms, and I'm going to scatter them around basically and then cover them up with yet more wood chip. Hopefully less than I've put in now, because I am so weltering. I've gone really deep with the wood chip because it's going to be like a living skin of the allotment. It's going to retain loads of water in the beds. If I've done a wood chip bed, this is called the Back to Eden method of gardening. It's amazing. Check it out if you haven't already. And also I'm going to be using living paths, so I'm going to be growing some mushrooms in my paths and I'm going to be feeding them with wood chips every so often. It's going to be very exciting. I love having mushroom powder. We grow mushrooms and then we powder them, and you can add them into everything. Like literally I put powdered mushrooms in everything. I'm a very big powdered vegetable fan since I've started growing on the allotment, and even before that I loved like everything. It's just the best. Now these mushrooms are going to be super exciting for me, but also I've ensured I'm going to be dampering down the weeds. We've got quite a lot of bindweed and stinging nettles etc on this allotment, and I'm hoping to alleviate it with very deep mulch, like I said, Back to Eden method, which over time will break down into amazing compost. I've done it at home and it's worked amazingly. I've grown such a lot of stuff in my tiny little garden bed at home and I know that it works really well. So I've gone ahead and done that. I'm going to try to put some more wood chip around the allotment, but it looks so much better. Right, my goodness, it looks so much better. So I'm actually going to be sowing my potatoes in roof stout method, which is a method that is basically deep mulch, and I'm going to be mulching with wood chips. So I've got my wood chip beds. I've got 2 of them. One of them is pretty much done. One of them needs a little bit of work still, but I'm going to be doing that over the foreseeable future, and I'm going to be making sure it's done in the next couple of weeks because I'm going to be sowing them, because Friday, which should be the day that you see this actually, is St. Patrick's Day, which means it is the day that we're able to sow out potatoes. So I'm really excited about that. With my mushrooms, I'm not going to be sowing them in the potato beds on the basis that I'm going to be digging them all up and disturbing the mycelium, but I am going to be sowing it in the bed behind the chicken coop, because that whole area is kind of neglected and that is the perfect space to be doing some mushrooms, because if it's neglected no one's going to be walking on the mushrooms as they are, you know, starting to produce. So that's really exciting. Now the reason why I've gone for wine caps and blue oyster mushrooms is just because of the basis they grow really well in wood chip and it's really cheap for me to get. So that's where we're starting off. This has been so much work. Oh my days. I went to get into bed yesterday and I was like I could barely move. My muscles were hurting so much. You actually never know how much work there is in an allotment until you start doing it. And honestly, I feel like I've lost weight because I've done so much work over the last 2 days. I don't think I could go to the gym after this. I'm so tired. But yeah, I've got a whole other allotment to do, and there's not very much wood chip left, which is exciting. So there are several benefits of using the back to Eden method, or the deep mulch method, depending on which one you want to call it. And they are retaining water, which is primary benefit of the deep mulch method, because it basically insulates the soil from losing water, and all of that carbon, all of that decaying matter of wood chip really retains the water, and it slows down evaporation, which is pretty cool. Because if you think about it, this summer we had a terrible drought, and honestly my back to Eden method bed at home just shrugged it off, because it was able to retain so much more moisture than just bare soil. Another thing that is one of the primary reasons I actually do this is to suppress weeds. Deep mulch really stops weed seeds being able to germinate, because it's preventing the sunlight basically reaching the soil surface, which is awesome. And it just stops the weeds that are very small or very weak being able to grow all the way up through the deep mulch, which is awesome. You do have to use quite a deep mulch, up to like a foot on garden beds, and a couple of feet even if you've got really nasty ones like we've do. So maybe we'll even put some more wood chip on top of this. We're not too sure. See how it goes. Another thing is it adds nutrition to the soil as the mulch starts to break down over time. Now the great thing about this mulch is it's got different things in it. It's got quite thick branches in it, it's got leaves in it, it's got tiny little bits of dust in it, and this will all break down at different times and store lots of oxygen within the layers as well, and improve the structure of the soil, which is so important. So unlike the bark that you buy as mulch, like from the supermarkets and stuff, which have all basically the same size particles in it, which won't break down as well, you've got to have a mixture of about 50-50 green and brown, which this does. You can see how vibrantly green it is, which is awesome. It also produces lots and lots of food for worms, which will come up to the surface, and that's what you want, because you want loads and loads of worms in there. You find over a little period that you will have more worms in this soil than soil without nutrients being added to it. Now, saying that, the nutrients will break down over time. Next year and the year after, you really do see a huge benefit using this method. I have clay soil at home, and everybody like has a bad sort of thing about clay beds, but I have a complete clay bed in my back garden, and I've grown hundreds of different types of vegetables, you name it. We were completely self-sufficient in terms of tomatoes from that bed, and it's only a small bed. When I first put that bed in, you couldn't even put a shovel in it at all. Like, it was so compacted that you couldn't. I struggled to dig down enough to put a plant in the ground. But now I'm telling you, it's absolutely gorgeous soil. You could dig a hole easily in it because that soil structure is built up. Another thing that deep mulch does is it insulates the soil, so it stops the soil being worn away. So we have a big problem with like dust and things like that, where tilling will actually make your soil damaged and it will actually be eroded. Whereas if you cover up the soil with a big layer of mulch, you actually don't have that issue. It also insulates the plant roots from extreme temperatures and weather fluctuations. So if you actually use deep mulch over, say, grapevines and things, they're better at overwintering than if you do nothing. The decomposing mulch will actually warm up as well, which will give it a nice insulating layer. It does help improve the soil health. Like I was saying, the organic matter as it breaks down will be included into the soil, and it will help the soil structure. It will increase fertility of the soil, which is awesome. And more importantly than anything, and you know I say this all the time, is improving and supporting the beneficial microorganisms that actually help break down all organic matter, so it makes it available to plants to absorb, which is really, really fundamental for health of plants. I always say that I'm not really growing plants, I'm growing soil, and growing soil is a long process that happens over time. So I don't mind the deep mulch method, but I've heard horrible things about it, and when I did this last year, I was told that I'm ruining my allotment and that I should scrape it up, I won't be able to grow anything. But I'm telling you guys, I grew the most vegetables on the entire allotment last year, and I'm really proud of that, and I was told that by the committee, which is awesome. And I did it in a drought and probably one of the worst years for growing, so it does work, and it's such a easy method to ensure that you have less work and you're able to grow beautiful vegetables with less stress. I hate weeding, as you know, and I did do some weeding last year, but not very much compared to like other people. I do have 2 allotments, so it is going to be some weeding at some area in time. I don't want you thinking Nick said there was not going to be any weeding. When I'm saying there's going to be less reduced weeding, I'm talking about there's going to be less than if you were doing traditional methods. There will be still some, but I'm telling you, pulling a weed out of deep mulch is so easy. Oh, it's so nice, which is really weird way of saying it. Like, you can just hold it with a finger and pull it out, whereas if you till, it could be like digging right the way down and pulling and pulling, and it's awful. So I have felt that is easier than, I don't really dig, so than what I imagine digging's like. But I have to say, moving all of this stuff is not easier than the no dig method. I've been barreling for, I think I worked it out to be 12 hours over 2 days. That's a long time. I'm going to admit to you, I'm so tired from doing all of this. I was absolutely destroyed for the rest of the day. Not to say I don't really love spending time at the allotment, but I'm really hoping that this will have a big impact on the weeds. The amount of stinging nettles on this allotment is very difficult to deal with. I absolutely hate being stung by stinging nettles. I should know. I spend most of my time being stung by stinging nettles, particularly on the other side of the allotment where it hasn't had someone cultivate it for 4 years. It literally is an absolute hub of stinging nettles. So I'm hoping that this method will help me, as it did at home, to improve the soil health, retain water, but mostly repress them weeds so that they don't germinate or spread too much. I'm really hoping that's a reality it can help, but it's also making an absolute perfect bed for mushrooms as well throughout the allotment. As you can see, I've got multiple opportunities to sow mushrooms out of the way, and where they've got a little bit of shade between this blackcurrant bush, and then I've got all raspberries down the side, and I've got tons and tons of rhubarb. So there's also some really cool and exciting benefits of growing mushrooms as well. As I've said, I'm going to be growing mushrooms pretty much all along this bed and all along the rhubarb bed, and that's because mushrooms are so beneficial within the gardening world, and especially in a vegetable garden. They help recycling nutrients that will break down quicker because of the mushrooms, such as wood chips, and they actually help to break down organic matter such as dead plant material, etc., and they will restore that to the soil much quicker than if there was no mushrooms there. It helps improve the fertility of the soil, and it also helps plants grow really well. Like I said, we're growing soil, we're not growing plants. Now, it also helps the condition of the soil because it helps to break up compact soils, mushrooms in general, because it's got the mycelium that have really deep vines that go all the way through the soil structure. It helps with drainage, and it helps release enzymes that break down all of those organic materials and compounds so that they are more bioavailable to your plants. Mushrooms actually want different types of nutrients than your plants, so they work really well, and they don't take anything and reduce the yield of your plants at all. In fact, they actually increase the yield of the entire vegetable bed and increase the overall cropping of the bed, because of the mycelium, which is the network that kind of is that when you dig down, it's like a white, thick white mat that's inside the wood chips, which will actually spread all the way throughout the soil, and it will work with your plants in like a symbiotic relationship where your plants will give it some sugars and your mushrooms will help it in many different ways to have a really strong immune system, etc. In fact, and I thought this was particularly interesting, oyster mushrooms can actually control pests within the garden. So they are natural pesticide properties. So they stop things like nematode and soil-borne pathogens from attacking your plants, which is really cool, because if you're like me and you're an organic gardener and perhaps even organic treatments you're not okay with too much in the garden, this will stop needing any chemicals within the garden, which is very exciting. Also, and I have to say this, mushrooms are beautiful and really fun to grow, so it is just nice to have that sort of challenge within the garden and see how we do with that, as we've never grown them outside before. Alright, thanks for watching. Now, I was going to bring the drone down today and make a really cool shot of like the new chipped beds, but I've totally forgotten the batteries for the drone. I remember the drone though, and the control, which is good, but not actually the bit that actually. So thank you so much for watching, and if you like content like this, please go ahead and subscribe. It's free, and you can watch us develop and see if this was a good idea or it was a bad idea, and see how everything grows over the next couple of months. So thanks so much for watching.